Welcome back to another edition of the Friday Show, brought to you this week by Woodbine. The big card this weekend at Woodbine is on Sunday with the Cup and Saucer Stakes for 2-year-olds, the Durham Cup, that's a grade 3, and the Ontario Matron Stakes also on Sunday. So 3 big stakes on the Sunday card this weekend at Woodbine. I'm Ray Pollock, joined by Editor-in-Chief Natalie Voss, and our special guest, who's becoming a regular guest, Attorney Bob Heleringer, the author of Equine Regulatory Law, and our go-to person on questions about equine regulatory law.
Wow,
Bob,
there's going to be a lot of Kentucky lawyers going to be upset with that last line. I'll tell you that. But honored to be here again, Ray, as always, on Friday or any other day.
Well, I was thinking, maybe we should just do a regular show with you, because we seem to never run out of topics.
Well, that speaks to the nature of our game lately. Lots and lots of litigation, and good for the lawyers, maybe not so good for the game.
Well, the reason we wanted to talk to you is just in the last week, a week ago today, Friday, Gulfstream Park suspended 5 trainers. Now that was the word they used for violating house rules related to the use of clenbuterol. We don't know exactly how long these trainers were suspended for. They were a little bit evasive about that. I think it was between 10 and 40 days. But I had one trainer, Peter Walder, texted me, and he says, "I'm not suspended. It's a big difference." So let's start with that. First of all, can that really be a suspension if it's done by the racetrack versus a regulatory agency?
Well, as you said, the racetrack doesn't have any jurisdiction over a licensee's license. Okay, that can only be revoked or suspended, denied by the regulatory body of that state. So, but every track, I was looking at some of the stall application forms at a couple of racetracks, and there's language in all of them that pretty much attempts anyway to bind the trainer to obeying and being at the mercy of their own rules, their own track's own rules and regulations that they draw up. And even though they're not in here, of course, it just says in blindly that a trainer will abide by them, and that their owners are bound by them signing this stall application. They're bound by the same thing. So it's an attempt by the track to preserve their autonomy as a they hope a private business, and so even have in effect more authority than the racing commission, which is bound by state law to give hearings and due process and that kind of thing. So these things have been challenged, Ray, in recent years with some success. That if the track's going to do this, and however they want to call it, an exclusion, a suspension's not quite accurate, but an exclusion, I guess, that at some point they're going to have to provide a reason through some kind of a process where this person can put on a defense, this licensed person. So, but until somebody really challenges it, of the people you've mentioned, we don't know what would be the outcome in a given state.
Could that vary from state to state, Bob, as to whether that challenge would be successful?
Yes, ma'am. I was doing some research last night, free, Ray, don't worry. But anyway, there's a federal case out of New Mexico very recently, last couple of years, that basically said the New Mexico tracks have complete autonomy, common law right to exclude. And the federal court upheld that. They threw out the challenge to an exclusion, I think, by all of the New Mexico tracks in that case. And then you run the gamut to this case out of Pennsylvania in 2012 the Tito Moreno case, where Penn National attempted to exclude it, but they didn't call it that. They didn't eject him, but he couldn't enter any horses. And he had 48 hours to get what horses he had off the grounds. If any, he couldn't transfer any horses without their approval. And so he asked for a hearing in front of the Racing Commission of Pennsylvania. Said, no, you haven't been ejected. So his lawyer, Mr. Pincus, that we talked about yesterday, called it a constructive ejection. And the federal court agreed with him and struck down a Pennsylvania statute that had attempted to provide for a prompt hearing, but never defined prompt, leaving it totally up to the commission to define prompt. So this is something where only the track took action. The Racing Commission didn't do anything per se. And so it was this trainer, Mr. Moreno, versus Penn National. And so there is some background to a challenge for this, and it can be successful. Again, as Natalie said, depending on where you are. That's been racing's curse since it was started. 38 states have racing, and you got 38 different racing commissions and different rules of racing. And this is something the federal bill is supposed to all make go away.
Yeah.
And I hope it will. But anyway, yes, that's a long answer to your question. Yes, it depends on where you are.
I think there's just a lot of confusion among fans, the horse players, people in the industry about what these mean. When Churchill Downs said it suspended Bob Baffert for 2 years, again, suspension, but is it really a suspension? They're not allowing him to stable or race at their tracks. That didn't affect his ability to run horses back in California where he's based, or New Jersey said you're welcome here. And we've got the same thing with the Gulfstream 5. Peter Walder, I think, tried to enter horses in New York, and he agreed to scratch them, I believe, after, at least based on reporting in the Daily Racing Form, after NYRA said, I don't think it's a great idea for you to run your horses here, because we may have to schedule a hearing to look into what happened in Florida, which was, I think, a little subtle arm twisting, maybe.
Well, I don't want to spend his money, but I would have said, okay, let's have the hearing. How about tomorrow? I've done nothing wrong, and I want to run the horse. And if the race is in a couple of days, then, let's have the hearing.
So these exclusions or trespasses or, suspensions handed out by a racetrack have absolutely no authority in any other jurisdiction. Is that fair?
I think that's absolutely accurate. You could use it anecdotally. You could say, well, he's been ruled, or he's been excluded from this state and that state, but then his lawyer could say, yeah, but he's been allowed to race here, and there. I mean, I don't know. It would be a wash. I just think that based on the cases, the more recent cases that I've read, that a track would be on much more solid ground with being as explicit as possible about the grounds and offering a hearing of some without it being asked. Say, we'll convene next Monday at 8:00. We'll have, if this man wants to put on come and be heard, we'll hear what he has to say. I mean, anything to comport with due process. The law has evolved in the 50 or 60 years since the famous Bobby Martin case, where a federal court said, a track has an inherent right. It's pretty broad, inherent right. In other words, just because of who they are, to exclude anybody they want for any reason, whether or not they have a license, as long as it's not, for what they call constitutional grounds, race, religion, whatever. Right. So, and a lot of states followed that for years until Berry versus Barchi. And that changed the entire equation. when the U.S. Supreme Court said, I mean, even the lay people watching this may be familiar with that case where the U.S. Supreme Court said a person has a property interest in their license. And when you have that, you have due process that attaches to it. So you can't take it without due process, without a hearing, a prompt hearing at a meaningful time and in a meaningful manner, as the court said. And so ever since that time, even though all this language still stays in these stall applications, I mean, you could read this, they just won't take it out. I guess they feel bad about taking it out, but there's so much language in these things that run counter to really what recent case law is, but they're going to leave it in so they can still claim it, I guess. But you've got to have some kind of due process component to this, particularly, I guess, when the person requests it or demands it. And if you don't provide it, then I think there's going to be a problem for the track.
Has anything sort of changed in recent years with regard to, whether tracks might find a friendlier environment for this kind of thing? 'Cause, I've covered the aftercare realm for a while, and when I've asked about a trainer or owner being excluded for violating, anti-slaughter or aftercare policies, I've always been told, well, we don't want to go to court over excluding somebody because we just sort of don't want to get into it. But now these tracks are willing to exclude people for other reasons. So did anything change in the legal environment to make this more comfortable for them? Or why do you think this is happening?
Well, it happens a lot because a lot of trainers, horse people, don't have the resources really to fight it. You're talking about a major legal undertaking. They have the deeper pockets, the racetracks do, and some people may just give up and try to find a track that will take them. Others who have the resources challenge it, and again, depending a lot on where they are, will find a judge who will listen and who will rule that they weren't treated in comportment with due process. So, yeah, I mean, it has changed a lot, but you talk about the aftercare, that you talk about the Moomaw case. Ironically enough, I don't know if you're familiar with that, where Thistledown threw off the entire Moomaw family because they supposedly had allowed one of their horses. They claimed they didn't know any better, but one of their horses ended up in a slaughter facility that was rescued, and the woman called the track and was kind of the whistleblower, and it had a semi-comical interlude where they had a hearing on this, and at some hotel in Cleveland, a conference room, and the guy had the horse brought to this hearing in through the parking lot, and I think this is all in the record, attempted to bring the horse into the hearing. Moomaws are an interesting group, but anyway, they lost. That went up to the Sixth Circuit like twice, and they lost. The Sixth Circuit said the track had the right to put these conditions in their stall applications and that kind of thing, and stakes nominations. It's in everything, license applications. But and of course, at the end, the Moomaws had all kind of hearings. And so it wasn't like they weren't deprived entirely of their rights, but that's another interesting area of where a trainer could run afoul of what might be called the house rules of a particular track.
I think for those aspiring lawyers that want to look this one up, I think Moomaw is Muumaw, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, I've got the site here if you want it. I mean, you ask me all the time not to get too much into the legal stuff, Ray. So I didn't want to cite, 623 F second, whatever. But it's I was for a while when I was doing supplements to my book. That you're so nice to plug every time. The Moomaws were in every annual supplement. I mean, there was always an update, and I kept in close touch with their lawyer, who I'm trying to remember his name. Great guy, and funny guy. But anyway, it was had many, many chapters to that case. And it all started from a horse that they couldn't account for. And then they did. So anyway,
I know that
so much humor in the law.
I know that there have been exclusions or trespasses for quite some time, but it seems like it's really started ramping up more in the last few years. I think of when Jerry Hollendorfer was banned at Santa Anita in 2019. The situation with Bob Baffert this year at Churchill. Also, NYRA is conducting a hearing to look into charges against him. What we have at Gulfstream Park earlier this year, I think we reported on Wayne Potts being excluded at a couple of tracks in the Northeast. Carl Broberg just recently was excluded by Churchill Downs. Why does it seem like, and this is a question for Natalie too, who looks at this stuff very carefully, why does it seem like there's more of this going on now than there used to be?
Go ahead, Natalie. I have my answer.
Strangely, it seems almost like the tracks are kind of reacting to, I would say, a lower tolerance from the public for allowing people to stick around once they've kind of learned that the person has done something that they don't look upon favorably. So it kind of seems to me like the tracks are choosing to do this now at a time when they're more sensitive to public reception than possibly they used to be a few years ago. But I'm sort of a little bit confused why they're doing it this close to the enactment of HISA. Is it because they think HISA is not going to effectively do this for itself? Is it because they think, well, we're almost to the finish line where we don't have to worry about this anymore anyway, so we're just going to sort of take all of our shots, now in the last few months or a couple of years before it becomes moot? Like, I'm not quite sure I understand how the federal bill might relate to a willingness or not willingness to do that, but I think it's because they're getting more pressure from the public than they used to about why don't you do something about so-and-so. And, it's probably not a bad thing if they're listening to the public more, but very often I think also they get a little bit tuned out to members of the public who get upset about something and don't really understand which authority they should be going to. We hear emails from people all the time who don't necessarily understand the regulatory process through the commission, what the rulings and appeal processes are like, what role the track would normally play. And so I think they get some of these complaints and ignore them because they say it's not my problem. And then at some point they decided, well, I'm tired of getting these complaints. Maybe I'm going to do something about it.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's an image issue, I think, for racing. And we experienced this when Santa Anita had those unfortunate breakdowns. People who couldn't spell horse racing, especially in political offices. I remember Dianne Feinstein, who's probably not your average $2 bettor, the senator from California, was going to try to close Santa Anita and made all these threats. And as a former office holder, I can say that she was probably responding to pressure she got from her constituents. They were calling or writing or emailing. And so you don't need much of that before you get a response out of somebody in elective office. So, you had that years ago. While Natalie was talking, I was thinking of the Barbaro and the Eight Bells cases that were back to back on national TV, one in the Preakness, one in the Derby, these horrific breakdowns that for the one day of the year when millions of people, again, who aren't that familiar with horse racing are watching, and of course the attention of the television coverage was on these catastrophic breakdowns, even while the race is going on. You had a camera going back, of course, Eight Bells was after the race, but the thing is, and then there's a hue and cry to do something, and racing justifiably couldn't be seen as not doing anything. So they're going to try to root out anybody they think is cheating or is contributing to these possible outcomes. And so, if nothing else, they could say, well, even if they lose in court, they can say, we tried. We try to keep an honest game, and racing has always been very sensitive about that through the decades. And so this is just an extension of that. I think they're just trying to protect their image and the game. And to a certain extent, they need to be applauded for that. But still, so it's successful, they need to always protect the due process rights of the licensee anyway, because what good is all this effort if it doesn't come to some kind of success?
I don't want to let you go, Bob, without asking one last question. This is one we get all the time. Natalie gets the emails and people asking us all the time, why is it taking so long in Kentucky to adjudicate the Kentucky Derby positive test by Medina Spirit? Do you have any insights on that?
I don't have anything more than what you've printed, Ray, and covered, and we appreciate all your coverage. Nobody would know about these things otherwise, but I guess they're still waiting for this last test to be finished. They want everything nice and tidy, I'm sure, to present at the hearing. I think it's going to happen. It will happen, but you're right. The longer people don't understand legal issues, and they don't understand. And I mean, you could look back to the Dancer's Image case, and I think the hearing on that, if I'm not mistaken, before the full racing commission was in November of that year. The disqualification was in May. That happened, as soon as they got the test back, the winner was, well, I get in trouble for this. Every time I say was disqualified, people email me, wasn't disqualified, the purse was taken away. And okay, well, but they took action on the Tuesday after the Derby. And then they had a hearing within 2 weeks of that. And they meted out, 30-day penalties to the trainer and took the purse. And the full hearing in front of the racing commission was in November. And now after that, it got in the court system, and it took a full 4 years before the Kentucky's highest court eventually upheld the racing commission. But as far as the administrative part of it, it went in a fairly timely way. So, I at some point it's going to happen, but it has taken a while.
I think you earlier referred to one of those as annuity cases for attorneys. Is that right?
Well, no, that was in Mr. Baffert's case.
Okay.
He's operating on so many fronts and with so much legal resources. I mean, all of us equine lawyers could just be jealous. That's of Mr. Craig Robertson and his hardworking and full-time working law firm. It's he's in a lot of places and getting paid for it, as we should, right? Let's don't begrudge any of us making a living here.
That's why we're so grateful to have you come here pro bono and talk to us.
Nothing like having lawyers on. I'm sure the people watching are thrilled. I'm hoping that most of the time this program is about horses and our wonderful sport. Anyway,
Natalie, any last requests for Bob before we?
No, the only thing I would say is, dear readers, in case you didn't infer this from what Ray said earlier, we don't know when the ruling is coming. We appreciate your questions and your feedback, but please stop asking me like I know. I don't know. If I knew, I would tell you, but I don't. So just a short little PSA there. We love getting your emails, but we do not know anything beyond what's on the website. Just want to throw that out there.
Are most of those emails from Tim Sullivan? Journal. I mean, that's worth a column a week to him. As to
I mean, he'll know before I know.
Informing his legion of readers that they still haven't had the hearing yet. I mean, that's at least a weekly. I would call it a non-update. But
for those outside of Louisville, Tim is the columnung at the Courier Journal in Louisville. So
and just loves horse racing. He just is a passionate fan of our sport. Hung firmly in cheek. Okay.
Yeah. The Courier Journal used to do great coverage of horse racing.
Oh my God. The Louisville Times, they had two papers and each had two turf riders. What a quaint expression, turf riders. Yeah. And of course that's all gone. I came back from Vermont and I got the courier. I'm a fossil that still gets it at home, and I looked for the Churchill entries so I could watch it on TV. That marvelous invention, and it wasn't in there. And I panicked. I thought, well, now they've excluded that. That's our word of the day, exclusion. And so I emailed Tim, my good friend, and said, is that gone too? And well, the next day, before he replied, the next day comes, it must have been an aberration. There's the entries. So I said, wow, I got results quickly. Anyway, wasn't that interesting. Anyway, Tim is
Bob,
interesting guy.
We always appreciate you coming on and to help us understand these legal issues a little bit. Author of Equine Regulatory Law, Bob Heleringer. We'll talk to you again soon, I hope. Thanks so much. We'll be right back after with Joe Nevels to take a look at this week's Woodbine Star of the Week.
Safe conduct tackled by British Royalty Collective Force. Riptide Rock comes up on the outside. British Royalty's gone to the front. British Royalty tackled by Riptide Rock on the outside. British Royalty in front holding out with Riptide Rock. They have come away, and then Collective Force in the Breeder Stakes. It's Patrick Husbands. British Royalty on the inside. Justin Stein, Riptide Rock, but British Royalty is absolutely outstaying them and will win the 130th Breeder Stakes very well. British Royalty 3.5 lengths to Riptide Rock. Collective Force was third. Harlan Estates run fourth. Then HC Holiday followed by Go Take Charge. And the time is 2:34 and flat. 2:34 flat.
They put the Queen on their money, but that's not the only place where you can find British royalty in Canada. You can find the equine version in the winner's circle for the third leg of the Canadian Triple Crown, the Breeder Stakes, en route to earning our Woodbine Star of the Week honors. Now, I was really impressed with the patience that jockey Patrick Husbands showed in this race, keeping British royalty tucked in on the rail and hitting go when the time was right. The Breeder Stakes is 1.5 miles on the turf, and that's not just any turf course at Woodbine. So a winning ride like that really just displayed the level of mastery that Husbands has over the course.
Yeah, I was convinced that Riptide Rock was going to roll right past, and then just something kicked in, and there's a difference between middle distance, and then when you get to 1.5 miles, some horses just stay, and this English Channel gelding proved that 1.5 miles is right up his alley. And what a nice weekend for Bruce Lunsford. He cones this horse with trainer Barbara Minshaw, who they had the horse earlier this year. I think it was claimed from Lunsford for $25,000, and they claimed it right back for $40,000. And the same weekend, he won the Woodward with Art Collector at Belmont Park. So Canadian Classic and a Grade 1 at Belmont Park, all in the same weekend. Not bad.
I'd say that's a worthwhile investment. I also want to take a moment to shout out Bernard McCormick's Cara Bloodstock, which consigned 2/3 of this year's Canadian Triple Crown and Queen's Plate winner Safe Conduct, and British Royalty, who won the Breeder Stakes. Always glad to see Bernard succeed. Good for you.
All right, well, that's going to do it for this week's edition of the Friday Show, presented by Woodbine. Thanks to our good friend Bob Heleringer for coming in and explaining some things, give us a explainer on some of these legal questions involving exclusions and suspensions. And we will see you next week. Until then.